Hey kiddos, this week what we're going to do is we're going to do something a little bit different in grammar. And so the last several weeks we've been focusing a lot on sentences. We've been looking at fragments, run-ons, making sure sentences are complete by having a subject and a predicate. We've talked about compound sentences. We've talked about complex sentences. And so what we're going to do this week is something a little bit different. So today what you're just going to do is you're just going to kind of watch me and then the next couple of days, you'll have this on a slide and you're going to go in and edit it on um, your own. And I'm going to be looking for you to be finding the run ons, all of those kinds of things. Okay. So, what I'm going to do is model for you how we're going to do this. And today, again, you're just watching. I would take notes if you need to, take a picture of the final product if you need to. And so that way you're ready to roll for the rest of the week. Okay. So, I'm going to read through here. You already see all my boxes. It's just hiding my edits. But when I read through, I am looking for sentences that are too long. I'm looking for sentences that are too short. I'm looking for sentences that may need capitalization, punctuation. We're editing. When we're editing something, we make it look better. By making it look better, it means that we're making sure that there are no errors in punctuation, capitalization, usage, or spelling. Okay, so that's what we're going to look at today. Says people the world over has been flying kites for centuries. In fact, kites were invented over 2,000 years ago. Whew, that was a long sentence. Okay, so the first thing that kind of caught my ear and made me think, this doesn't sound right, is that people the world over has been flying kites. I know that when I'm talking about people, okay, so multiple people, plural, I should be using the word have and not the word has. So over top of has, I would write have. People the world over have been flying kites for centuries. In fact, kites were invented over 2,000 years ago. Okay, so that was a really long sentence. So I kind of already have a hint that I'm going to need some form of punctuation. Now, I may be struggling to figure out where to separate it. So I have to ask myself, what were the two things being talked about there? Well, the first part was that people have been flying kites for a long time. And then the second thing was that the first kite was invented over 2,000 years ago. That is a good area to separate. So I'm going to check myself. If I were to separate here, okay, if I were to make this the separating spot, I need to check and make sure I have a subject and a predicate. Okay, people the world over, that's my subject. So people all over the world. And then they have been flying. That's my subject. So what are the people doing? They're flying kites. Okay, so that fits. Let's check the other sentence to see if that would make sense still. So I take that part out and I separate this here. It says, in fact, kites are invented over 2,000 years ago. Okay, subject, kites. What about kites? They were invented over 2,000 years ago. Excellent. So both sentences have a subject and a predicate. So I can go ahead and say that I want to put my period after centuries. What that's going to mean is that this I needs to be a capital I. And you'll notice that I mark that by doing these 3 lines under the word that I want capitalized. Okay. So that's something you need to write down, kiddos. 3 lines means I'm capitalizing a letter. Okay. The little target sign tells me that I'm putting in a period. All right, let's keep going. Oh, what do you see right here? It says, I've got the exclamation point. One ancient story tells of a Chinese general. His army was trying to overthrow a cruel emperor. Okay, again, very long, but what I already know is that this should have a capital letter on it. This should be a big O because it is the beginning of a sentence. So I would, again, put my 3 marks under the letter to let me know that it needed to be capitalized. One ancient story tells of a Chinese general. His army was trying to overthrow a cruel emperor. Okay, let's think about that very first week of school. We learned about, me and Siri are just not getting along today. We learned about proper nouns. Chinese. This is a proper noun. It is the name of a nationality of people. And so what I would do is give my 3 lines to make my C capital. Okay, but this sentence is still way too long. So I've got to think of a place where to divide. So one thing I thought about is that it talks about the Chinese general, but then it tells me about the cruel emperor. So if I were to separate it here, I need to check and make sure that I have a subject and predicate in both places. So my subject would be his army. What was his army doing? Trying to overthrow. So I've got a subject and predicate there. Oop. And then if I were to separate it from here, okay, I've got one ancient story tells of a Chinese general. What's the subject? An ancient story. And what's it do? It tells. Perfect. So I've got a subject and predicate in both parts. So I can separate my sentences here. So I'm adding a period. I'm capitalizing the H because I know the first letter of a sentence has to be capitalized. Okay, so we're all the way down here, and boom, I see it again, a lowercase t. I know that t needs to be capitalized. The general made a kite. He tied a knot in the string. Next, his soldiers flew it in the direction of the palace. When the kite was over the palace, the general marked the string and reeled in the kite. Whew, that was long. Notice how I didn't take a breath. If there is no punctuation, okay, periods, exclamation points, question marks, commas, they all tell me to take a breath. The only spot where I could take a breath was here, and commas are a mini breath. They're not a big breath like a period. So from here all the way down, no period. I know that's way too long. So I've got to ask myself, where did the divides need to be? So what were the different ideas in what I just read? Well, I know the general made a kite. He tied a knot in the string. He talked about how he flew the kite, and then the general marked the string and reeled it in. So I'm hearing 4 different ideas. My first spot where I'm going to separate is going to be right here in kite and he. The general made a kite. What's my subject? General. What'd he do? Made a kite. That's all I need. Okay. I could also combine these with what we learned with something like a comma when then adding in and. Okay. So think about how you want to keep those separated. He tied a knot in the string. Okay, well, let's look at this word knot. I know that N-O-T means not, as in like the opposite. Like I did not do that. Not a knot like a knot in a rope. That is actually spelled K-N-O-T. So that was a spelling / usage error there. All right, so the general made a kite. He tied the knot in the string. That's where I'm going to have my next separation. One hint was that this N was capitalized. That tells me either the N needs to be put into lowercase or I need to really think about a period before it. I see that same hint here with this capital W. And so that tells me that this is probably where my next period is going to go. It says, next, his soldiers flew in the direction of the palace. Subject, his soldiers, what they do, flew it. Perfect. All right, I've got my W all ready to go. When the kite was over the palace, the general marked the string and reeled in the kite. Okay, remember, we talked about complex sentences. I'm just going to write a C-O-M. Well, actually, I probably should all do complex. We talked about complex sentences. This is a subordinating conjunction. Remember, when I have a subordinating conjunction at the beginning of my sentence, the comma has to go in the middle. When the kite was over the palace, the general marked the string and reeled in the kite. And at the very end, I know I need a period. Okay, kiddos? So this is what we're going to be working on this week, is looking at things like this and kind of editing them, correcting them. You'll notice that this is a lot of what your English interim looked like that you came up and did with Miss Crow. And so we want to be really thinking about everything we're learning in grammar when we attack paragraphs like this. And one thing I want you to think about too is this old trick that I like. If it doesn't sound right, it probably isn't right, okay? All right, kiddos, remember today you were just taking notes. You may want to take a quick picture of this as like a reference for how to add a period, how to make letters capitalized. See how I have a little teepee here to add in my comma. If I'm taking a word out and replacing it with something else, I'm going to or strike it out and write over the top of it. Okay, so go ahead, take a picture of this so that you've got it, and then you guys will work on this for me this week.